Have you ever stepped away from a dispute thinking, why on earth did I just burn 40 minutes of my existence trying to impart elementary logic to a grown man who operates as if raising his voice somehow validates his point? Yes, I've been there too. We've all experienced it, attempting to connect with someone who clearly isn't interested in finding common ground. They don't absorb what's said. They don't contemplate. They simply prepare their next volley. These individuals aren't engaged in a search for truth. They're participating for the thrill of conflict, and you find yourself cast as the reluctant participant in their game of emotional warfare. Now, allow me to share a difficult reality. Getting drawn into arguments with such individuals is akin to attempting to towel off during a downpour. The longer you contend, the more soaked you become. Stoic philosophy offers a stark yet elegant perspective on this. Our time is the most precious resource we possess. Why then do we allocate it to individuals who approach discussions as if they were skirmishes? In this presentation, I'll meticulously dissect the behaviors these people exhibit and explain why maintaining your silence could very well be your most formidable strategy. We will examine how the Stoics dealt with individuals impervious to reason. Hint: they generally didn't engage. And I'll show you how to recover your tranquility, vitality, and arguably your mental well-being by taking one straightforward action: disengaging and walking away. So if you're weary of expending energy yelling into the void of emotional tempests and yearn to reclaim your inner peace, stay tuned. Before we proceed, please click the subscribe button, activate notifications, and let's explore the understated yet potent discipline of denying them the engagement they crave. Number 1. Their unwillingness to listen. Let's delve into one of the most exasperating and spirit-depleting encounters possible with another person: the effort to engage logically with someone who flat out refuses to listen. This isn't because they're perplexed, overloaded, or simply having an off day. It's because their objective isn't comprehension. Their goal is dominance. You can sense it almost right away. You're articulating a point grounded in reason, honesty, perhaps even exposing a bit of vulnerability, and they contort your statements like dough, cut you off mid-sentence, and behave as though their decibel level or witty retorts actually signify something meaningful. But what they're truly revealing is this: they aren't pursuing accuracy. They're pursuing a win. And at that juncture, you're no longer participating in a conversation. You're ensnared in a competition you never agreed to enter. I personally squandered countless hours, sometimes entire days, engaging with individuals like this. One figure stands out distinctly: a family acquaintance I'll refer to as Steve. Every interaction, no matter how informal, became an occasion for him to assert his correctness. Be it about politics, my life choices, or even the method I used to prepare my coffee, he invariably needed to be right. One afternoon, following a strained exchange over a completely trivial matter, a critical insight dawned on me. He wasn't actually hearing me out. He was merely alert for chances to notch up a point. I distinctly recall departing from that interaction feeling not merely irritated, but diminished, as if my vital energy had been drained by someone whose need to triumph overshadowed any desire for connection. And then it struck me: this interaction wasn't a dialogue. It constituted a theft of my time, my tranquility, my concentration. This is precisely where Stoicism, with its understated sagacity, enters the picture like a trusted companion and gently advises, "You are under no obligation to participate in this contest." Zeno articulated, "Better to stumble with the feet than with the tongue." And I finally grasped the depth of that statement. When you contend with an individual who has zero intent of listening, you jeopardize more than just your words. You jeopardize your equanimity. You forfeit fragments of your internal stability, attempting to validate yourself to someone who has already judged you as incorrect. The Stoic approach isn't one of passivity. It's deliberate. It involves identifying when an exchange ceases to be a dialogue and morphs into a spectacle, and possessing the fortitude to exit the stage. It's the understanding that your mental serenity is far too precious to be offered up on the altar of another person's ego. Therefore, the next occasion you find yourself entangled in a conflict masquerading as a discussion, pose this question to yourself: is this individual pursuing clarity or asserting control? If the answer is the latter, withdraw, not in capitulation, but with dignity, because silence, when coupled with self-respect, resonates more profoundly than any argument you might potentially win. Number 2, their distortion of your words. Let's address one of the most infuriating and, quite frankly, manipulative strategies employed when people sense they cannot prevail in a straightforward debate: the twisting of your words. Rather than addressing your actual statements, they warp them. They blow them out of proportion. They extract them from their context, or even more egregiously, entirely remold your intended meaning to align with a narrative that benefits their own purposes. This is a subtle assertion of control, not an attempt to grasp your perspective, but a calculated maneuver designed to discredit you. And the most detrimental aspect? If you aren't vigilant, you'll be ensnared in their manipulative game, depleting your energy in attempts to rectify a version of events that was never real to begin with. This strategy is not concerned with truth. It is concerned with control. When an individual distorts your words, they aren't aiming for mutual understanding. They're aiming for ascendancy. They turn your own declarations into weapons, not due to misunderstanding, but because attacking a contorted version is simpler than facing the substance of your point. They flourish by sowing confusion, transforming lucid communication into disarray to seize the advantage. And the more vigorously you defend yourself, the further you are drawn into their snare. Each clarification provides fresh fodder for misrepresentation. Every effort to be comprehended merely furnishes them with more material to manipulate. Debating with someone of this nature resembles yelling into a chamber of distorting mirrors. Everything you articulate is reflected back at you, warped and twisted. And the more you object, the more misshapen the reflection becomes. It is draining, it is bewildering, and above all, it is needless. This is where Stoicism establishes a firm boundary. The Stoics understood that truth does not require amplification, and it certainly does not require defense against those determined to misinterpret it. Plato noted, "A wise man speaks because he has something to say, a fool because he has to say something." This insight informs us that silence, employed judiciously, isn't an indication of weakness. It represents strength. When someone twists your words, the most potent counter isn't a more forceful rebuttal. It is disengagement. Not prompted by apprehension, but by lucidity. Your purpose isn't to win a distorted contest. Your purpose is to safeguard your tranquility. Stoic wisdom serves as a reminder. If someone is set on misconstruing your meaning, it isn't your duty to set them straight. It is your obligation to withdraw, preserving your dignity. The truth does not need to plead for acceptance, and it certainly doesn't need to engage in messy disputes to validate itself. Allow your silence to convey what words are no longer required to express. Number 3. Their reliance on emotion over reason. Let's examine one of the most emotionally manipulative and utterly counterproductive tactics people resort to when they realize logic isn't on their side: arguing from a place of emotion rather than reason. You've probably witnessed it. When the evidence doesn't support their position, they change tack. Suddenly, the issue isn't about objective reality. It's about how personally affronted they feel. They amplify their tone, magnify minor errors, redirect responsibility, and adopt the role of the injured party, not aiming for resolution, but to elicit an emotional response from you. Because if they can succeed in making you emotional, they gain command of the situation. It ceases to be a dialogue. It transforms into a theatrical display. And the instant you react emotionally, they consider themselves victorious. Consider a situation from several years back involving two long-standing business associates in a boutique consulting practice. One partner, let's name him Mark, uncovered financial irregularities, missing invoices, manipulated expense records. Upon raising these concerns in a confidential meeting with his co-founder Daniel, something peculiar occurred. Daniel didn't refute the findings, at least not explicitly. Instead, he erupted into a highly charged emotional display. He leveled accusations of betrayal against Mark, insisted he was being unjustly singled out, and even succumbed to tears during his tirade. This wasn't a confession. It wasn't a reasoned defense. It was a calculated attempt to submerge the factual issue beneath a wave of emotion. Mark departed that meeting feeling bewildered, even culpable, wondering if perhaps he had been overly severe. That illustrates the potency of emotional manipulation. It sidetracks the truth by redirecting attention. This is precisely the kind of scenario Stoic philosophy cautions against. Epictetus famously stated, "He who angers you conquers you." When you permit another individual to dictate your emotional equilibrium, you relinquish control, not because their stance holds more merit, but because you've sacrificed your internal composure. The Stoics held that preserving calmness amidst emotional turbulence isn't merely prudent, it's crucial. Because the moment you lose your composure, you forfeit your clarity. And once clarity vanishes, so does your command over the situation. What Mark eventually grasped was that he had no obligation to retort emotionally or mirror Daniel's dramatic outbursts. Instead, he meticulously documented all findings, maintained his composure, and allowed the evidence to carry more weight than the histrionics. Ultimately, Daniel's performance collapsed under its own weight because emotions, regardless of their intensity, cannot indefinitely obscure the truth. So when you encounter someone employing emotion to obfuscate an issue, resist being drawn into their turmoil. Remain centered. Let your tranquility be more impactful than their commotion. Because the instant you cease fueling the emotional flames, the performance concludes, and the truth remains standing, unadorned. Number 4. Their refusal to concede error. Are you aware that psychology employs a term, cognitive dissonance, to describe the mental unease individuals experience when faced with information conflicting with their established beliefs? Rather than revising their perspectives, many individuals will distort reality to sidestep the admission of being mistaken. This isn't merely obstinacy. It functions as a protective mechanism. However, in our daily interactions, we don't require psychological jargon to recognize how irritating this conduct can be. We've all encountered individuals who steadfastly refuse to acknowledge when they are incorrect. Even when presented with clear, irrefutable facts, they grasp onto their pride as if it were a flotation device, contorting the circumstances, disregarding proof, or shifting blame. They will do anything to evade uttering those 3 simple words: "I was wrong." This pattern of behavior isn't rooted in a commitment to truth. It stems from ego. For certain individuals, admitting error equates to a forfeiture of power, as though confessing "I made a mistake" somehow diminishes their stature. Yet the reality is quite the contrary. As long as they persist in resisting the truth, they aren't safeguarding their strength. They are revealing their vulnerability. Pride obstructs development. When an individual declines to recognize their errors, they effectively shut the door on opportunities for learning, enhancement, and genuine connection. What remains is not a productive exchange, but an impasse. You aren't engaging in collaboration. You're merely retracing the same ground while they erect ever higher emotional barriers. Picture yourself standing before a locked entrance holding the key. You attempt to convey that the door is secured and you possess the means to open it, yet the other person vehemently maintains that the door is already ajar. They push, they pull, they dispute, anything except acknowledging the simple truth before them. That mirrors the experience of attempting to reason with someone who resists admitting their own fault. Regardless of how lucidly you offer the solution, they remain incapable of accepting it, not because it lacks veracity, but because their pride acts as an insurmountable barrier. This is where the wisdom of Stoicism proves not just beneficial, but indispensable. Epictetus observed, "It is impossible to learn what one thinks they already know." When a person perceives themselves as perpetually correct, they block off all avenues for personal growth. The Stoic practitioner does not attempt to impose understanding where it cannot take root. Instead, they prioritize clarity over confrontation. You have no need to combat someone's denial, simply to affirm your own truth. Thus, when you encounter someone ensnared by their pride, refrain from squandering your energy on perpetual corrections. Present the truth calmly on one occasion and then release it. Their unwillingness to evolve is not your burden to bear. Your tranquility, your advancement, your forward trajectory, these are the elements that truly hold significance. While they remain immobilized behind their self-imposed locked door, you've already progressed beyond yours. Number 5. Their constant shifting of the goalposts. Let's discuss one of the most mentally taxing maneuvers people employ during discussions: shifting the goalposts. This particular tactic can render any dialogue seemingly interminable, and irrespective of how logical, well-prepared, or composed you remain, it invariably leaves you feeling perpetually one step behind, achieving absolutely no progress. These individuals aren't present to share perspectives. They lack curiosity. They aren't engaged in a quest for truth. They are merely playing a game. The instant you offer a coherent response, they alter the inquiry. The moment you substantiate your assertion with proof, they introduce an entirely novel point that bore no relevance to the initial discussion. Their objective isn't lucidity, it is dominance. When someone continually shifts the goalposts, they aren't endeavoring to resolve anything. They are attempting to exhaust you. You might believe you're involved in a meaningful exchange, but in actuality, you're caught in a repetitive cycle. Striving towards a conclusion, they will perpetually prevent you from reaching. It resembles pursuing a phantom. The more intensely you attempt to grasp it, the more rapidly it eludes you. You might rationalize, "If I just articulate it in this manner, perhaps they will finally comprehend." But comprehension is not their aim. Keeping you perpetually destabilized is. And this is precisely where Stoic wisdom emerges as the voice of rationality amidst the confusion. Seneca once remarked, "The wise man is not swayed by the opinions of fools." This isn't a statement of hauteur. It's one of clarity. A discerning individual does not persist in chasing elusive targets. They don't expend vitality attempting to validate themselves to individuals committed to misunderstanding. Stoicism imparts the lesson that mental serenity holds greater value than triumphing in a dispute engineered to lead nowhere. You don't demonstrate fortitude by remaining engaged in a contest that is fundamentally unfair. You demonstrate it by disengaging. The most effective course of action upon identifying this pattern isn't formulating another rebuttal. It isn't presenting additional evidence. It is achieving awareness. When the interaction begins to resemble an inescapable labyrinth, your task isn't to navigate it. It's to depart from it. Not with resentment, not with a sense of failure, but from a position of strength. Because your time, your concentration, and your vitality are far too precious to be squandered on perpetual debates founded upon constantly shifting premises. Truth does not require the pursuit of validation. It does not need to emerge victorious from a game. It merely needs to be acknowledged by the individual who possesses it. So, the next instance someone persistently alters the parameters, recall, you are under no obligation to keep pace. You need only step aside. That isn't conceding defeat. It's prioritizing your tranquility over their manipulative game. Number 6, their attacks on you, not your position. When an individual attempts to ensnare you in their turbulence, stay firmly anchored in your own peace. Let's examine one of the most detrimental tactics capable of instantly transforming any substantive discussion into a confrontation. When someone directs their attacks at you personally, rather than addressing your argument. This shift often occurs swiftly, and it is almost invariably deliberate. The moment they perceive they cannot prevail through reason, they pivot. Suddenly, the focus shifts away from the idea itself. It becomes about your personality, your history, your manner of speaking, even your intellect. They cease engaging with the substance of your point and commence efforts to demean you. Why does this happen? Because when an individual lacks factual support, they attempt to secure victory by making you feel inadequate. And when you respond with emotion, they perceive it as their triumph. This conduct speaks volumes more about their character than it does about yours. Employing insults or ridicule is the recourse of someone depleted of substantive arguments. It serves as a distinct indicator that the person isn't present to foster understanding. They are present to assert dominance. And once you are drawn into defending your personal attributes, the original subject of the conversation evaporates. The exchange is no longer governed by logic or truth. It devolves into a spectacle driven by ego and emotion, where the most forceful voice, rather than the most lucid one, claims the final word. A political discussion panel not too long ago perfectly illustrated this phenomenon. One participant calmly presented a detailed argument regarding healthcare policy, referencing statistics, legislative details, and relevant examples. The panelist holding the opposing view, evidently finding himself logically outmaneuvered, did not counter with factual points. Instead, he initiated a personal assault, challenging the speaker's credibility, deriding his background, and suggesting he was too disconnected to grasp the complexities of the issue. However, the speaker refused to take the bait. There was no elevation of voice, no flustered self-defense, merely a brief, composed pause, a slight acknowledgement, and a steadfast return to the central argument. That measured restraint, the refusal to dignify the insult with engagement, neutralized the attack's potency. It became readily apparent to the observers precisely who had lost their composure. This exemplifies Stoicism applied in real-world situations. Marcus Aurelius noted, "The best answer to anger is silence. Such silence does not signify weakness. It represents a conscious choice. It embodies the wisdom to discern that not every assault warrants the expenditure of your energy. When someone directs hostility towards you, they desire your reaction. Your composure deprives them of that gratification. It demonstrates that your sense of self-worth is not subject to negotiation, and that their invectives are merely inconsequential disturbances. Therefore, the next time you encounter personal attacks presented under the guise of debate, resist the urge to combat fire with fire. Counter it with stillness. That isn't an act of withdrawal. It's an act of elevation, because ultimately, it isn't the insult that characterizes you. It's your response to it. Number 7, they're arguing solely to consume your time. Time is the most valuable thing a man can spend. Theophrastus. There exists a specific category of individual who engages in arguments not to resolve issues or foster understanding. They argue with the simple objective of ensnaring you in their state of disarray. These people harbor no concern for truth, lucidity, or finding middle ground. They aren't endeavoring to discover insights or achieve any form of resolution. No, their actual motivation is considerably more trivial: to squander your time. They engage in nitpicking, deliberately sidetrack the discussion, distort your statements, and lead the exchange down irrelevant paths, not out of a desire for answers, but purely for your attention. For such individuals, contention serves as a form of amusement. Your exasperation becomes their source of energy. Identifying this pattern isn't always straightforward initially. They might commence with what appears to be a sincere query or point of disagreement. You reply courteously, under the impression that you're participating in a constructive debate. However, as the discussion extends, you come to realize that you are making no headway whatsoever. You address one point, and they immediately introduce an entirely unrelated matter. You provide clarification, and they willfully misinterpret it. You offer factual evidence, and they evade with sarcasm or tangential stories. It begins to feel as though you're operating on a treadmill, expending considerable effort yet remaining stationary. That is the critical juncture at which you must pause and inquire, is this truly a conversation, or is it an entanglement designed to trap me? Consider a gentleman named Robert, who served on the governing board of a small, non-profit entity. He possessed intelligence, articulated himself well, and was utterly habituated to arguing. During board meetings, every single proposed item escalated into a protracted verbal contest. If a member introduced a potential new initiative, Robert wouldn't offer constructive feedback. Instead, he would meticulously dissect the wording, speculate on improbable consequences, or dispute the sequence of points in the accompanying presentation. On one occasion, when a colleague proposed a straightforward fundraising concept, Robert occupied 20 minutes debating the appropriateness of the term support, questioning if it carried excessive emotional weight. A hush fell over the room. Attendees mentally checked out, and once again valuable time evaporated. This constituted his habitual modus operandi. The discussion itself held no intrinsic importance. Its continuation was the sole objective. This is where the principles of Stoic philosophy penetrate the surrounding clamor with surgical precision. Theophrastus reminds us, time is our most precious currency. It's the one thing we can never reclaim once spent. Engaging in argument with someone whose sole purpose is to generate noise is tantamount to entrusting them with your finances and observing as they frivolously incinerate your resources. Stoicism instructs us to identify the elements within our control, our attention, our responses, our decisions, and to safeguard them with unwavering diligence. You are under no obligation to allocate your energy to someone uninterested in achieving clarity. You do not owe your focus to someone exploiting it against you. Genuine strength resides in disengaging, not stemming from a sense of loss, but from sagacity. When you withdraw from a fruitless argument, you do not forfeit anything. You safeguard what is most essential, your time, your serenity, and your clarity of purpose. Because the individual prolonging an argument merely for the sake of arguing is pursuing discord. You, conversely, are pursuing meaning. Allow them to revolve in their self-created vortex. You have more significant destinations awaiting you. If you've ever concluded a discussion feeling as if you've just completed an intellectual endurance test, congratulations. You likely contended with someone whose aim was simply to deplete your mental resources, not to exchange viewpoints. And let's face it, existence is too brief to perpetually clarify fundamental reasoning for individuals who approach every interaction like a self-scripted, self-directed, and self-starring courtroom proceeding. You are not their captive audience, nor are you their adversary. You are an individual who places value on tranquility, purpose, and your own time, qualities that render you formidable to those who flourish amidst disorder. So, the next occasion someone starts shifting the parameters, distorting your statements, or arguing merely to relish the sound of their own voice, grant yourself a favor. Offer a slight smile, take a sip of your coffee, and disengage with the focused resolve of a Stoic fulfilling his mission. Bear in mind, not every confrontation requires your participation, and not every person acting foolishly warrants a response. If this resonated with you, please indicate so with a like. Share your thoughts in the comments. Even a simple declaration like, "I'm finished with pointless arguments," suffices. And be sure to subscribe for further insights, astute observations, and the occasional dose of stark reality. Your time holds immense value. Let's collectively endeavor to preserve